Hi, and welcome to the Supra-conscious Leadership podcast. I'm Rosalia. I'm going to be your host. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about how Supra-conscious Leadership podcast came to be, a little bit about my story and why I decided to co-create this with Source. I do want to disclose I have two puppies with me, Angel and Luna. Angel is a Maltipoo and Luna is a Golden Doodle. So they will be stepping into the podcast and barking here and there. So just bear with me as we do that, okay? I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been in healthcare for over 13 years now. I'm a serial entrepreneur, an author, a poet, an artivist. I guess you can say I'm multi passionate, okay? And this this podcast I decided to do at this time, it's a deep calling from my soul, to share from a deeper level, a different level, um, to shift the way I show up everywhere in life, in my relationships, in my family, in my business, um, and to speak about God, Source, Supraconsciousness, our true I am presence more and more and more. And you see how my voice is kind of fading in, coming in and out. So, speaking my truth, my voice, my point of view, my perception on life, on consciousness, on different things, on leadership, on alternative mental health solutions. So, all of these things we're going to be talking about on regulating our nervous system, on living, thriving, and being in life in a different way. There just has to be a different way. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment. So, for the past decade, um, I have been working on, personal, professional, and spiritual development with a lot of discipline. I've done a lot of things. Some you can imagine, some you cannot. But I worked all the way from um, pl- all sorts of plant medicines, gurus, masters, alchemy teacher, avatars, you name it. Down the rabbit hole I went. Right. And same thing with personal development and same thing with everything. Right. So I come from Cuba. Growing up, there was a lot of lack and poverty and so forth. So one of the things I wanted to make sure is that I never, ever, ever again went through that situation and that my family never gets to experience that, right? My children, I have two boys, one's 19 currently and one is 12. Plus my puppies. I have two elderly people that live with me as well, and my wife. So I wanted to, just hyperachiever, hustle, burnout mindset, very materialistic. And in 2018, we were doing really well financially, but very, very poorly everywhere else, right? My relationship was crumbling. Um, my relationship with God was not good. And because the success I had achieved was not made with a proper foundation, it was made mostly from my ego. There got a point where, yes, I had all these successful things, all these blessings, right? But I wasn't even grateful to wake up in the morning. So I went into one of the biggest depressions, my biggest to date back in 2018, to the point where I even had suicide ideations. I'd have completely crumbled, affected my nervous system, my mental health, and just everything. Luckily, I asked for help. And naturally, that's where I went down the rabbit hole, right? I looked for help everywhere I could: traditional medicine, alternative medicine, plant medicine, energy work, breath work, somatic work, everything I could, right? I no longer wanted to be here, but there was something deep within that I just knew I couldn't give up. And even though I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel at that moment, something deeper was guiding this, right? Guiding the next steps for me, if you would. Um, so I went through also went through many different religions in that time frame, looking for God outside myself everywhere that I could, right? Um, and at that time, I had no idea we had a soul. As silly as that may sound to some, and as normal as that may sound to some, I just thought I was my body, right? I was very materialistic view. I had not explored any other religions where, they mentioned consciousness, or they mentioned the soul, or they mentioned um energy centers, or they mentioned any of that. It was not in my awareness at that time, right? So the more and more I explored, and the more and more that I experimented and by myself, and I had a personal and direct experience of these things, um naturally my perception on life shifted, right? um but before that shifted, everything crumbled for me, right? The business, the marriage, financial, just everything crumbled. All the identities I had were stripped away. What I like to call my dark night of the soul, which is, I am forever grateful with God, with my soul, for, I don't want to say putting me, but for me choosing, even to go through that process, that purification, the alchemy process. And for the last 10 years, it didn't happen once. It happened many, many, many times. And I was humbled and humbled and humbled and put to my knees time and time again. Death and rebirth, after death and rebirth, after death and rebirth. And even when I thought I couldn't die some more, I kept dying some more. So it has been such a beautiful journey, but I couldn't see that at that time. I also couldn't see the reason why it was happening. I naturally went through the grieving process, right? Uh, Not accepting, and then all the way to, denial, all the way to acceptance. So it's natural, we're human, right? We are on a path of remembering our connection to source, our connection to ourselves, our connection to our soul, our connection to each other, our connection to nature. Um, and it's really quite a beautiful path. Everything has its purpose. I personally believe that every path leads to Rome. Maybe some, are bumpier, some are longer, some are different shape, but, you know, back home to the self, to the one true self, right? That lives within each and every one of us, to the oneness, to our interconnectedness. And yes, this podcast will be a little woo woo. Absolutely. Okay. Um, but enjoy it, right? Maybe a bumpy ride. We're going to talk about everything. There's really no cap here as what we're going to talk about. But I want to make sure that I center it in providing you guys with actual tools and actual things that you can do um, in your everyday life, alternative mental health solutions, tools to regulate your nervous system, like really when it comes down to it, when you need to make a tough decision, when you're being faced to go to, when you get a notice that you have to be in court, when you're being sued, like when something, like when you're in business, when there's a deadline and you haven't been able to meet it, when real life strikes, when there's a conflict in the home, when there's a conflict with family, when there's a health issue, like when loss happens, right? When divorce happens, when we are pinned against the wall, like what do we do? Who do we reach out to? What tools are there for us? How can we do things differently, or at least be offered the opportunity of knowing that there are alternative solutions, whether that is to mental health, to business, to relationships, a different way of operating, of thriving, of living life, right? Other than burnout and really just killing ourselves, to be honest, killing ourselves with bad habits, with food, with addiction, with sex, with drugs, with anything we can find to numb the suffering of being alive to a certain extent, right? Because we cannot see what other options we have forgotten joy, we have forgotten play. We have forgotten a lot of the wisdom that children bring to us and remind us of. We have forgotten our own inner child, sorry. We've forgotten how to integrate our shadow and our light, our feminine and our masculine. Like for me, for years, I was operating on my masculine because I had to, to survive, or I thought I had to, right? To survive. I was not allowing myself for that feminine side to come up and be the intuitive, the guide, the oracle, the creative, the joyful part of me. I was just, I just wasn't allowing myself to be me, because I forgot who me was, right? I put everybody else first. I put the material world first. I forgot about God. I forgot about that inside of me existed something else. A couple of important pillars along the way that I want to share with you that were big catalyst for me, aside from all the tools, right, that I went through. Forgiveness, it's a big one, especially forgiveness. I know it sounds silly, but forgiveness for myself, for all the things I had done, for all the people I have damaged, for all the suffering I have caused. Forgiveness for myself. And I continue to practice forgiveness and compassion and love and self care. And the pace that I was leading my life slow down tremendously. Slow down, right? I don't focus on 100 things on 100 to-do lists anymore. I'm a master delegator. And also, I make sure not to be in so many projects at once because I'm so sensitive to where my attention, my intention, and my will are going, to where my energy is leaking in people, places, and things. So I want to make sure that I very, very much take care of my energy, take care of my container, always make sure that I pour into my cup first so I can be of service to others, so I can be of service to my family, so I can be of service to my clients, so I can have my own nervous system regulated. Right? So I know it may sound a little selfish, but focusing on me first for a change, right? So all of these things have taken time, have taken trial and error, because maybe what has worked for me may not work for you, or at least not for you in this part of the journey, and that's okay, right? So really allowing myself to explore different ways of operating rather than staying in this circle, that they said, oh, this is the only place where you can kind of fit in and be, like really breaking through all the limitations, whether it's ancestral, whether it's on my mother's side, my father's side, whether it's self-imposed or society, or um, other, I'll just say other, right? So really questioning, right? The big questions, right? Who am I? What am I? Why am I here? Right? The deeper questions in life. Um, and really just self inquiry, right? Meditation, breath work, journaling, being in nature, going within, being in silence. So practicing all these things that I get to commune without a third party, directly with source, right? And then from there, tapping into that superconsciousness. So that superconsciousness essentially is that the quantum field source, that I am presence within you, the ultimate, the absolute, I don't know what word you have for it, right? But yeah, that supraconsciousness, and we all have direct access to our supraconsciousness within ourselves. We are the temple, we are that vessel, we are that bridge, and we are the light of the world, right? So really making time to commune with God. It's has been a catalyst in my journey so far. Forgiveness was an important one, huge. And aside from myself, of course, for others, um, even though now I have a different understanding, I really don't have anything to forgive at this point in that sense, because I understand forgiveness a little bit different now. But at that moment, I needed to go through that forgiveness process for myself and for others that I thought had harmed me at some point, and for those I had harmed. And really understanding that forgiveness process a little bit. A book I really like that focuses on forgiveness that might be useful is A Course in Miracles. It does kind of center a lot around forgiveness. So you might want to look into that if it's something that resonates with you. The other part is innocence. I know, as weird as it may sound, innocence and humility those are two other pillars that are so important, because I have not been able to reach the parts of me and the parts of the divine and the parts of the superconsciousness from force or from ego or from demand or from a place that is not humble, that is not pure, and that it doesn't have the innocence of a child, right? Those are huge things to cultivate, to continue to cultivate, so we can stay humble, we can stay innocent with a beginner's mindset. Because if we already think we know everything, it's our process of transformation and evolution could be hindered a little bit. Okay. So, really being taught that by source the hard way, shall we say, right? I like to call it slaps of the universe. So I've gotten slapped many times. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And then the last, but not least important, is joy. Following my joy. I lost at that time back in 2018, I lost joy. I lost that spark for life, that curiosity. Um, and being able to find my creativity and following my joy again has been huge. One of the biggest catalysts for me has been painting. I love to paint. I do consider myself to be an artivist. So I may share with you guys at some point some of my artwork. Um, I also, with my mother here in Miami, we provide art workshops as well. So art has been such a huge catalyst and has brought my family together more. It has brought harmony to the community, to me, to my heart. Like whenever, and I like to say that God and art has saved my life more than once, right? So whenever I'm going through something, I paint, and it's one of the ways in which I meditate very, very deeply, and I commune with God through painting. So, yeah, our creativity, our joy, those are things we should not, why are we so serious when it comes to leadership? Why is play and business looked at as separate? How is joy not part of our day to day? How is nervous system regulation not part of our day to day? How is rest not part of our day to day? How is like not answering right away to an email or to a text that we know it's not urgent, right? And prioritizing really our attention as well, our self care, just there has to be a different way to lead, to operate, right? And being proactive with our mental health before it derails, before it scales, before it snowball into something bigger, right? Um, So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit of everything, and that's a little bit of my backstory. I Aside from the podcast, we have a community. If you guys feel called, is free. It's in Skool. It's Supra-conscious University. You guys have a free 7-day reset worth very much quite a bit of money. Just the reset alone, you will experience, and that's something else I want to. I don't want to just talk. I want you guys to really experience everything by yourselves. I want you to experience the transformation, the clarity, the discernment, the confidence, the I want to be able to translate the light of the divine in everything that I do, with attention, with intention, with will, with even light codes, right? That will transform everything: mind, body, spirit, our divine genome, the process of transfiguration, of convergence, Christ and Sophia union. And don't get me started because I love woo woo stuff, okay? So, yeah, right? So, this goes beyond anything we can really perceive with our current senses. We can perceive with our conscious mind, okay? You know this already. There's so much that goes on in our subconscious, and there's even a lot more that goes on in our supraconsciousness. As a little bonus here, before I cut this one, I want to share with you guys a map of consciousness that was given to me by Source and by my guides. Hang on, let's see. 1 second. Let me figure out how to share this. Let me see. No, that's not it. 1 second. Entire screen. Let me see. One moment. Hang on, hang on. Okay, there we go. So you guys should be seeing this. So Quam is Quantum Alchemist Master Map of Consciousness. This is another company I have. And let me walk you through it a little bit. I'll try not to make it too long. So, our current perception of the self. So, you're going to see throughout your life that the current perception of yourself will change and shift. Okay. Hopefully, at some point, you will begin to realize more and more your I am presence, your I am perception of self, yourself, instead of with a lowercase s, with a capital S, and so forth. But I don't want to get into that. I don't want to condition you into what you have to perceive yourself as. That's your path. That's for you to figure out. Okay. So our current perception of self has to very much impacts our current reality. Our emotions very much impact the current reality. Our feelings, same thing. Senses, and you see, is split. We have our regular senses, and we have what I like to call our subtle senses. Okay. And then you have your thoughts, your subconscious, right? As you know, it directs, they say, 95% of your life, right? And only 5% is actually conscious. Our outlook in life, right? Our projections, our personification, the archetypes, right? If you're familiar with the tarot, or you're familiar with Carl Jung and the archetypes, right? We go through so many archetypes, and sometimes we have multiple archetypes happening at once, right? And sometimes there's one that predominates more in that specific time in our life, right? And our personality, of course, our id, our ego, our super ego, the self, Atman and Brahman, right? So all the way back to source, to our soul, and then source, right? And then here in the middle, we have an infinity symbol, right? At the bottom of this infinity symbol, we have empty space, collective unconscious void, right? So all of us, maybe without being conscious, if we think we're all one, for example, we do have our collective as one unified field on consciousness, right? So a lot of people are operating from the collective unconscious, right? And I don't really like to make the difference of like dimensions and vibrations and so forth, but I understand sometimes to explain these things, words, there are no words to explain it. It's something that either you experience or but I'll try my best. Let's just say there's a lower vibrational aspect of things, just to put it into some sort of words, right? And many people are operating from this lower aspect of consciousness. Okay. So our collective unconscious here. Okay. And then at the upper part of the infinity symbol, we have our supra-consciousness, God, source, infinity, 0 point, the absolute. Okay. And then here in the middle, it's where they converge, right? And we all have the capability of tapping into directly, without any third parties or anything outside of you, your own breath, um, to the supraconsciousness, right? And from there, we can embody that, bring it down to matter, bring it down to, the ripple effect, right? We are that antenna, that bridge between heaven and earth, or however you want to put it, right? By accessing the quantum field, you have access to all, so infinite possibilities. The more aware you become, the more you can choose from your superconsciousness and not the collective unconscious, right? So if we are just following what so and so is doing, what the masses are doing, what social media is telling us to do, what the government's telling us to do, you're just like following the crowd, right? You're not being your sovereign being. You're not reclaiming your sovereignty. You're not tapping directly into the absolute. And potato, everything is fine. Everything is part of the journey. It's fine if you're doing that. I did that for a very long time. It's all part of the process. Okay. Don't worry about it. But there comes a point where you actually are able to directly tap into whatever name you have for it. For the sake of this, I call it the super consciousness. And then there's such a beauty and a harmony with life, with source. You receive your divine directives, and you take aligned action with that. That's where God's will and your will merge as one unified field, right? And then from there you move from service to the little self, lowercase s, to the self with a capital S, or to the whole, one ecosystem of love, right? So I know it's woo woo, but I still wanted to say it anyways. um According to me, I stopped sharing. All right. Well, this is a little bit of what you're going to find on the Supra-conscious Leadership podcast. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join our free Skool community for amazing and free resources there for you. Okay. See you next time. Thank you.